You're listening to the Inside the Mix podcast with your host, Mark Matthews.
Welcome to the Inside the Mix podcast. I'm your host, Mark Matthews, and I'm excited to have you here with me today. Whether you're a synth music producer, artist, or enthusiast, I promise you'll get something out of this show. Every fortnight, I serve up interviews with synth music artists and provide you with an insight into their careers, creative processes, influences, and music industry tips and stories. Let's dive in. So welcome to the Inside the Mix podcast, and in today's episode I'm joined by Gaz and Tom of the award-winning Canadian electronic synth outfit Honeybeard. And in this episode we'll be discussing life before Honeybeard, the birth of the outfit, and new album Oneiros, I hope I pronounced that right, and basic sort of the songwriting and creative processes. So Honeybeard, thanks for joining me today.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, my pleasure. Signed to Retro Reverb Records, working with them. So I think you're the second outfit I've had on. I had Nick a few weeks ago from Ueno Nights. Really nice chap. So yeah, it's nice to have someone else on. Oh, and Cole as well. I totally forgot. I had Cole on a few weeks.
Oh yeah, Cole.
The actual...
How could you forget Cole?
Were you able to get a word in?
You know what really what happened with that, which is really bad, is that there was a really bad connection. So we lost half the interview.
That's probably your best.
So
it's probably still too long.
We love Cole. We're always winding him up.
Yeah, he's great, isn't he? I love his audio messages that he sends. They're fantastic.
He's a good guy. But don't tell him.
Yeah, really nice guy. So I got your bio here. So you're an award-winning electronic synth duo from Toronto, Canada. The band has been creating music since 2012, drawing on influences such as Depeche Mode, Gary Newman and The Doors. And you built up quite a reputation for your frenetic live performances with edgy songs that have shaken up typical synthwave tropes whilst balancing dark synths over bright thumping beats. And I did notice on your Instagram that you've got your first gig booked in 2021 on the 15th. Exciting.
Yeah, should be a good night. Looking forward to getting back to pre-pandemic ways here.
Yeah, I can imagine. When was the last time you gigged?
We probably had the last possible gig before the pandemic. I think it was March 14th or something like that, 13th, 14th of 2020. So pretty much right before they shut everything down here in Ontario.
Oh, wow. That's 2020. That's mad, isn't it? So what we'll do is we'll dive straight into sort of life before Honeybeard. So what I really want to sort of get to know is your sort of musical life or your musical background. So we start with yourself, Tom. What was your musical background? How did you start with your journey into music?
I was kind of always just, I kind of taught myself guitar, piano when I was younger. Never really got into any formal bands or anything, just more had fun with friends here and there. And then kind of would write silly little songs for myself and for nobody else in particular. And kind of got started that way. And then I met Gary here and jumped straight into Honeybeard.
Amazing. So when did you meet Gary then? So, I mean, it says here 2012. Did you meet him before then, or was that you sort of met him in 2012?
We met, I think it was 2011 or early 2012. I can't quite remember. Gary's shaking his head yes to the early 2012 part. Yeah. We were playing, we had an indoor training for Aussie Rules football, and we met there. He was new to the game, so I taught him how to hold the ball and whatnot.
Aussie Rules, is that quite big in Canada then, Aussie Rules football? I say big, but well known.
It's the largest league outside of Australia, I believe, is the Ontario Football League. But I don't think there's very many other leagues outside of Australia, so it's really just wins by default. It's not a massive sport here.
Yeah, brilliant. So you met Gaz in 2012. So Gaz, what was your sort of background leading up until meeting Tom and starting Honeybeard?
Well, I started in bands around 1994, and then I think my first proper band was in 1996. I think I was 17 at the time. It was called Freak with a PH, and we were absolutely brutal. And I only went on. I originally wanted to play drums, but then someone said, "Look, we need a bassist." So I said, "Oh, whatever." So I got a bass, and I was into Metallica at the time, and all those other heavy bands, Megadeth and whatnot. And so I was into that kind of stuff. And it went from like Freak, which was a really poor cover band, which taught me what not to do on the stage, to I was in a band called Devoid, which is like a grungy heavy metal stuff. And from there, I just went into various bands right up until 2004. I was in a band called Artificial Flight. And that was a bit more serious. We did a lot more work in Ireland, playing around the country. We didn't get too big because, of course, not everyone shared my dream of having that as a full-time job. So when the economic crash happened in 2011, myself, my girlfriend at the time was now my wife, we decided, let's get the hell out of here. So we went to Canada. Well, we had two options. We had Australia or Canada. Came to Canada in 2011, November 7th. And I happened to hear about a thing called Australian Rules Football, which I've seen. It's basically a game that rips off an Irish sport called Gaelic, just heads up on that. And so I came down here because I needed to make friends and I wanted to get band members. I want to get back into music. And I was going on, like, trying to source people out on the internet, and it wasn't great. Toronto is like not the friendliest of cities. You kind of have to meet people in sort of more close range ways. So I went down, and it was 2012, February 14th. It was a Tuesday night. And I went down that night, and I saw this big, buff, chunky, rugby player looking guy. And I just happened to talk to him, and he was showing me how to kick the ball. And then we got a conversation about music, and he told me that he played guitar and piano, and that's all I needed to hear. So the next day I asked him if he would like to start a band with me.
Oh, amazing. So going back to sort of your background there, so you mentioned you sort of your journey started in like 1994, and I noticed you say you played in various bands, and I noticed here you've got a Metallica Master of Puppets t-shirt on there. Amazing, by the way, one of my favorite albums of all time. So do you say it was quite a heavy band that you're in? So do you come from sort of like a rock or metal aesthetic or sort of sound? Is that one of your big influences?
Yeah, like a rock and grunge. When Nirvana came along, that blew me away. It's always one band that makes me sort of jump from like heavy metal then to grunge. Then around that time, I discovered The Doors, and that was it. The Doors is my favorite band of all time. And that's sort of, I'd be very tribal, going, no, I only like Nirvana, like, fuck Pearl Jam, I hate them. Or, I love Metallica, and I have no time for Megadeth. So that was just an immature way of looking at things, and I went from heavy metal to grunge to kind of alternative metal, sort of some Nine Inch Nails stuff. Definitely a massive Tool fan. That definitely changed how I looked at things. Then The Doors kind of broke me open into like older music and what that could be, and then eventually got into Pink Floyd. Pink Floyd showed me sort of the really genuine creative concept side of music and what real good guitar playing sounds like. So it was a strange journey. Now, I grew up in the early 80s, so I know my mom was always into like Boy George and Madonna and Gary Newman and all that kind of stuff. So, and my dad is into Jean-Michel Jarre. That's all he used to play. So the electronic element was always in the background. I used to think it was a guilty pleasure. I didn't think it actually writing music in the same vein.
Yeah, I would agree with that sort of sentiment. I very much think the same way. I was in a metal band for many, many years, and electronic music and sort of synth pop of the 80s was always, like you say, sort of a guilty pleasure for me. I'd like put on Duran Duran every now and again and stuff like that. And it was always, that guilty pleasure. But then at some point it turned, and I was actually, you know what, I'm going to have a go at producing this myself. So that's quite a cool journey that you've mapped out there. So Tom, what sort of journey have you taken with regards to sort of influences that leads you up into where you are now?
Well, when I was younger, Canada is quite a big country, so it was spent a lot of time in the car with kind of my dad in charge of the radio. So it was a lot of his favorite band would be the Beatles. So you end up 5 hours in a car ride listening to the Beatles kind of nonstop. Kind of got influenced by them quite a bit. Like a lot of the 70s rock was played a lot in our house. And then once I kind of, I think when I was in grade 4, the first CD or tape that I bought was the Green Day Dookie album. So like in 1994-ish. And kind of went into high school and a little bit of got more and more into like harder punk rock kind of stuff. And eventually aged out of it back into, now I'm very very eclectic in my music taste, so it's kind of all over the map now.
Yeah, is Dookie, is that the album with Basket Case on it? Have I got that right?
Yeah,
The album with Basket Case. Yeah. Did you listen to much Offspring around that time?
A little bit. For whatever reason, I didn't get as into Offspring. I know like lots of my friends are. That was like their.
Gaz has put his thumb
their
down
pivotal album for them.
Yeah, yeah. I think I was the other way around. So I listened to I didn't really pay much attention to Green Day. It was the Offspring. So yeah, I can kind of I can kind of see that. I can kind of see
the
that.
Offspring. All they did was shout his vocals. I just always got a pain in my head listening to the Offspring.
Yeah, Dexter. It is one of those, isn't it? I remember seeing them live. They're really, really good live, but it is fundamentally him shouting a lot of the time.
But Tom, you were a big Pennywise fan, weren't you?
Pennywise, yeah. Pennywise. I saw them live at Warp Tour.
Oh, amazing.
Probably 97 or something.
I always remember Pennywise. I don't know if you ever played Tony Hawk's 2 on PlayStation, but they did a song for Tony Hawk's 2, and I cannot remember what it is, but it's an amazing song.
I wouldn't be able to recall it off the top of my head.
No, that's going back 20 years or so now for me. I'm gonna look into that. I'm gonna find it on Spotify. Actually, I haven't listened to that in ages, but I've gone off on a tangent there. But yeah. So we're moving on to sort of Honeybeard. So you mentioned you started in 2012. So my first question with regards to that is, where did the name come from? It's quite an interesting name.
You want to take it, Gaz? It's kind of your thing.
Listen, it's a stupid name for a synth band. It really is. It's a stupid name for a band that's trying to.
The amount of times we get booked on shows, and it's like we're playing with guys who have like cellos and violins and banjos in their band, and it's like a folk night, and we're like, yeah, we're just gonna set up our lasers over here and these synthesizers. It's a really strange name for a synth
bit
band.
of a curse. Everyone thinks we're going to be like having, a strand of straw coming out of our mouth, wearing checkered shirts and straw hats. It's strange, but I wouldn't blame them. But really, where it came from was just when the economic crash in 2007, 8, and 9 really, really, really destroyed Ireland, because it's an open economy. We just can't latch on to natural industry. So I had a really good job, and then I lost it. And then I was in this massive rented house with cars and stuff, going, what the fuck am I going to do? So I was in a band at the time, as I spoke here at Artificial Flight. I sang. It was like a alternative rock band, and I sang a lot of falsetto, but I would sing aggressively as well. So it was murder on my throat. So it became quite intense at one point. We would be practicing 3 nights a week, and it would just be too much. So because I was out of work, I was also out of time. Like, I go to bed at like 4 a.m, and so I would also get drunk a lot, because what the fuck else are you going to do when you're unemployed? And I had a severance check, so I was definitely drinking all that. And there was one day where it got so bad, I would have honey, and I'd squeeze it in my throat to kind of coat my throat, because it was sore, and it really helps me. And I woke up one morning. I had a big beard as well, just because I was just so unkempt. I was wearing a string vest. It was just see a picture of a guy down on his luck, a stupid ginger Irishman down on his luck, drunk with a sore throat, drinking honey and drinking booze.
In a string vest.
And I woke up one morning, and the honey got stuck all over my beard. I obviously missed my face, and I had to cut it. And it was just that moment I was like, oh my God, what have I become? So it was funny. I wrote a song, an acoustic song called Honeybeard, and that didn't go anywhere at the time. But as me and Tom in early 2012 were sort of brainstorming names, we were coming up with the fucking shittest names. And then we came up with a shittier name, but for some reason, other people liked that one. So we spread it, a couple of friends. They were like, oh, I love it. And I don't think they realized we were into lasers and MIDIs and electronic stuff, Yeah. So I think at that time, we generally were playing acoustic songs, so it fit. And then so that's how it came about.
When we kind of started, like piano and acoustic guitar. So definitely was a more fitting name for that type of sound.
But then, around 2010, I went to the movies and I saw Drive. This is this is the typical blueprint for a lot of people. And we didn't realize this until 2018, Tom, when we found out there was a synthwave scene. We thought we were the only ones that knew about this bloody thing. And so I got that soundtrack, and it was also a soundtrack because I moved over to Canada at the same time. And I didn't like I liked the stuff that had vocals in it. I cut out everything else and I put a little playlist in. It was great. And then eventually he was like, Tom, you know what? I think we could figure out, because I had a distinct disdain for drummers, because the last band I was in, the drummer using two of my band, he was a terrible person. I was like, I just don't want to deal with drummers right now. So let's see if we can get if we can put the drums on computer or a drum machine or something. And that coupled with just being so buzzed about the Drive soundtrack, and then finding out that this kind of synth pop is alive and kicking well and sounds great, that accumulated into what Honeybeard eventually became.
That's an amazing story. I think starting out what you said about there being unemployed and having the honey in your beard and whatnot, which is an amazing story. But then leading into how you then found Drive, and then you found like the whole synthwave scene in like 2018. And it's interesting you mentioned Drive, because you, like you say, it is a blueprint for a lot of acts. So this is the 20th or 21st episode of the podcast, and I would say 75% of the people I've interviewed, if not more, have stated Drive as a massive influence.
The only thing I would say, just in order, is that we thought we were the only ones that really loved this movie. Like, we didn't know about other people. The Gallery Collective was going on at this time, and other people were starting to connect. I mean, I think Valingo, that podcast, he was coming up at that time, and other people were like reading his stuff and discovering each other and all that stuff, and we just were completely oblivious to that. We thought we were, like, our first song that we did and wrote, we called Drive. We didn't think anyone would, go, like, if anyone saw that now, they'd be like, oh my God. I'm sure a lot of people in the synthwave scene would be bitching about how unoriginal we are. But back then, we thought we were onto something unique. We thought wow, this is great. And we were discovering bands like the Chromatics, and then we'd find out who sounded like the Chromatics. And it was a complete discovery for us. And the more and more we're like, we love Depeche Mode and Gary Newman and, as you said, Duran Duran and all those bands when we were young just started to make sense. And we taught ourselves how to work Logic as well. That's our DAW. And it kind of took off from there. And the power it gave us, didn't it, Tom? It was just like all of a sudden we could put a full orchestra into our sound, and it was just great. The freedom was great.
Well, what's nice is we're still, I'd say, pretty novice at using Logic. We're by no means experts, so we're constantly kind of learning new tricks and new sounds and new ways to do things. So a lot of figuring that out comes from listening, like, oh, I like that type of sound or that effect. Like, let's try to figure out how that it kind of like how that's done, or how we can accomplish something similar. Really, not knowing the software kind of helped us in our songwriting, because it kind of forced us to, the songs had to sound good whether or not the production was good, right? So I think it kind of forced our songwriting into more melodic, kind of catchy songs, just because we couldn't get away with our bad production skills, I guess, especially in the early days.
Yeah, I suppose it's quite like the argument for, I play guitar, and I was self-taught for a number of years. And because no one's showed me how to use it, I'm trying to learn it myself, and I'm trying to imitate other sounds I hear. I guess it's quite similar in sound design. You hear a sound, you try and create it. But at the same time, you're then creating new sounds and new soundscapes to use in and so you're creating that originality. So it's interesting.
Exactly.
Yeah, so you mentioned about 2018 then, and you found the synthwave scene. Do you think not realizing that there was a scene was a positive for you when it came to writing your music, because it's sort of like you weren't influenced by other artists that already existed, if that makes any sense? So you can sort of like create in that bubble thinking you're the only ones there.
I think it definitely was beneficial at first to be completely unaware, and like our influences were less from within the scene and more from, we pulled stuff from outside, like from the Doors or the Beatles, or we were pulling more from what we had grown up with and adding that into kind of our synth productions, as opposed to like really trying to capture the synth sound or the synthwave sound. Is we weren't really aiming for that. We were aiming for, did the song sound good to us, not did it fit within this genre or whatever.
Yeah, it was definitely.
Yeah, and I think that's the best way to do it. I think
it was definitely advantageous because, first of all, we've played, I'd say, over 70 shows in Toronto. Yeah, around that, and it's a tough nut to crack, and there's not a big appetite for synth type music. There is, but it's very clicky, very hipstery, very fucking annoying, to be honest. And we try to like get chummy with them and play stuff, but we don't drink that Kool-Aid, right? So we didn't really blend in with that scene. So to know that there is such a scene that's welcoming and accessible, like the synthwave scene, was amazing for us, because they were like, oh, great, like-minded people who aren't going to judge us because, you know what I mean, we clothes we wear when we go on stage, or the bravado that we, it's like, it was great. It was just, we had somewhere where we could belong. But also from that, it's been interesting. The scene is very self-critical. It's all over the place at the moment, but it's, when we're, from our position, it's like, wait, you guys are gold. This is a gold little nugget. I know everyone's concerned about it and all that, but it's, look, when you're in the wilderness of the Toronto music scene and you're up against it all the time, and we'd be actively playing all the time, right? We're a live band first and foremost, and then to come into such a wonderful scene with great opportunities and great camaraderie and excellent sort of, everyone complains about the production factory of synthwave, but that's great, because that means that people come in, they shoot their shot, because it's very easy these days. It might sound crap, so what? Let it fly. Don't pay attention to it.
Yep.
They'll keep coming back and getting better and better and better. And a lot of the bedroom folks that can't last the journey, they'll go eventually, and it'll just self-replicate and get better, 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 and bigger, bigger, bigger. Right now, we think it's big, but it's a global phenomenon. It's not big. It really isn't. It can't survive in any one city. So, it's so like at the very start of growth, and I think people are tearing their heads about that. So for us, the big advantage coming into the scene was that it is a special little nugget, and we are absolutely delighted to be where we are in it. And it's a great place.
Yeah, I really like that idea of what you said there about bedroom producers and being at the start of like what is a scene that is growing, and then as time progresses, those who stay the course are just going to get better and better and better and better. I really like the idea of that, and then the quality of music is going to improve. And it's like, I totally agree with the idea of what you said there as well about how just release music, and it might be shit, it might not, but the only way you're going to progress is by keeping writing, release, and recording and releasing music. So my next question to you, I think you sort of answered it there really, was about which, are you a live band or are you a sort of a studio band first? So you mentioned being a live band first and foremost. So what made you sort of take that decision to be just a live band first and foremost?
I think that was mostly because I had zero experience in bands, and Gaz came from like a rock live band background. So he kind of led the way on how it's supposed to be done. And the only way he knew to do it was to pound the pavement and play as many shitty shows as possible until we got better and better. And we played a lot of shitty shows.
We did, Tommy, didn't we? Holy shit.
And a lot of Gaz was also very unaware of, like I mentioned earlier, how big Canada is, and would book shows. Like, oh, we're playing one night in Windsor and the next night in Montreal. How far is that drive? I'm like, oh, like 8-hour drive, and no problem, we'll make it.
You see, in Ireland, you can get to each side of Ireland within 8 hours, no problem. And actually, you can get to the other side of, so I'm in the east, you get to the west in 4 hours. You get to the south in 6. Get to the north in 3. Like, yeah, Canada's.
And during rush hour, you can't even cross Toronto in that much time.
Canada's too big, man. You don't need all that space. But anyway, we are a live band, because I think one of the reasons why bedroom producers don't last the course, and that's a generalization, it really is, but you kind of see it sometimes. They're more susceptible to falling by the wayside. Is that the fortitude to go through the live show circuit? It breaks your heart. It really does. It can be immensely rewarding and immensely, absolutely fucking depressing. We played some amazing shows where the crowd was just raucous, people jumping off our stage, everyone like asking to autograph our merch and all that. And we don't know who these people are. And then the next moment, we're in some backwater where there's this buzzing sound all the way through our set. The sound person doesn't give a shit. Other bands walk out and no one turns up. And you've traveled 4 or 5 hours and paid a lot of money. So you have those kind of days. But that makes you. And also something that this new album that we didn't get the benefit of is that we tend to play a lot of our songs live. We think they're finished. We play them live. We're like, oh, you know what? That didn't work. Or this could work. And playing them live makes them better. So that's always been good. But we are a live band, but I think ultimately we're songwriters. We're not producers. We're not snobby musicians. Like Tom can read music. I can't. I can hear music. That's it. But we're just songwriters first and foremost, as well as live performers.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think the idea of sort of like cutting your teeth on the live circuit does help sort of shape you as a musician. I mean, I've been there myself, where you've traveled sort of 4 hours and you play to the other bands and their girlfriends and their friends who turn up with them. That's if they stay and they don't go to KFC whilst you're performing and then come back and do their gig. So yeah, I think it's definitely a way of cutting your teeth as a musician.
And it also kind of shows you what it's like to get criticized and what it's like to get rejected. Because if you don't go through that rejection, I mean, even in the live sets, I've played in many bands and I've played friends who were in many bands. At one point, nearly every person in my school was in a band. I'm probably one of 5 out of like 50 that are still in bands. And some of those are like wedding bands now, right? So there's probably 2 guys, me included, that are in original bands still to this day from my class. And it just goes to show you that it's not for everyone. It is genuinely a hobby. And when it gets rough, they bail out. If you are a bedroom producer that's only existed on Twitter and Bandcamp, and you're just like me and Tom, and we took out our first EP, it's not great, right? The production's not great. All the tricks and all the stuff, we were just completely raw. But we went out and we gigged it, and we made improvements, and that's what it was. People saw it live and saw the energy live, but then when they listened to the CD, they were like, oh, that's not the same energy. It's because we didn't get there yet. So when bedroom producers put their stuff up, and it doesn't have that polished feel, or it's a little bit too generic, and then people shit all over it, and rightly so. That's the way that the things go. They either take it on the chin or they keep moving forward. Now, with a small scene like this, you can decide, what am I going to be? Am I going to be like a skullet? Am I just going to absolutely just tear this youngster apart? Or am I going to be a little bit more, decide not to review it? Or am I going to say, look, this wasn't the best. There's a lot of room for improvement, but you can tell that there's a lot of talent there waiting to come. We're looking forward to the next record. There's ways to do that. Anyway, that's an aside. But that's how we come up with regards to that.
Yeah, I think it's like you say, it's a good pathway. I think the music industry, like, you need to learn how to handle rejection, because and criticism as well. And I think the live circuit certainly does set you up for that, because it can be quite a harsh environment, like you mentioned. Yeah, definitely agree with that. So I want to ask you a question now about your live setup. So how does that work then? Is it just the 2 of you, or do you get others involved, like session musicians or depth musicians in, or is it just the 2 of you performing?
Just the 2 of us.
And how does that look then? So
usually what we do is we'd separate out our drum track. So the drum track is playing as like a backing track. And then for each song, depending on the complexity of our setup and how much gear we're able to bring, usually Gary and I are playing, usually it's 2 synth parts each, or 2 other parts. And then Gary would sing live.
I was going to ask that later on. So Gary, yourself, you're the singer then on the tracks for Honeybeard. Is
Yes.
that correct? Oh, amazing.
And isn't it weird? Tommy will remember this. When we first started out, we didn't figure out all that at the time. We just put the drums in and the bass in. I mean, we'd even play, we had a drum pads. We'd be playing the drum pads. And I don't know how to play piano or anything. I just play by ear, and I just taught myself. And I'd be playing here, like something on the Elisa's here, just like playing something and singing away. And then Tom would have two. He'd be playing maybe the lead part and the bass, and then all it really in the end was just the drums. And our setup was fucking massive. And
it took we needed to hire a van just to transport our stuff for the two of us.
Oh yeah, we had so much gear, and we put electric guitars in there as well, and we had pedals. And there's a video of us in our YouTube. Our second ever show was actually captured on video, and you can see some of it. And we had the stacked
a 3-tier stack or something of keyboards.
Yeah, 3-tier stack. You can even see us. It says Mike, and I had this little. I had a page, and I had a checklist of everything to turn off and turn back on again, because we'd go to the next thing, and I'd be playing the wrong sound, and I need to start my computer again or some bullshit like that. It was funny looking back, but we were so novice. I was just used to plugging a guitar and playing, but that's just what you do. That's how we started up, and then over time we're like, fuck that, right? We've proven that we can do this live, so we don't need to do that anymore. No one else is doing it, so we just took everything down. I play a guitar, and I'll sing, and I might play some lead parts depending what I can do. All I try to do is sing well, because I'm not the greatest singer consistently, and play what I need to play, because I always like to play something. I can take the guitar off, and I can jump out into the crowd because it's all wireless, and perform, like move around and dance and interact. And then Tom, he's kind of the engine room. He'll make sure that everything's lined up, that he's playing the main parts, the bass, whatever. So we can fit everything into a hatchback where it used to be a van.
A van. I found that amazing that you filled a van and you didn't even have a drum kit. That's good going, like, to fill a van.
Well, we also played a lot of shows where we had to provide our own PA systems.
Yeah.
Oh man, they're the worst when you got to provide the PA and set that up as well.
You know it's not going to be a good one.
And because Tom drives, I don't need a car in the city anymore. Because Tom drives, Tom would drive the show, which meant that I would be the donkey, right? So I would have to, Tom would just load up, it's like, you know that game Buckaroo? Tom would just load up all this stuff on top of me, right? I'm just like this pack mule, and then I'd go up like 20 million thousand flight of stairs. So, it was also good to reduce our footprint. So we just carry everything under our arm in one go. Thanks, Tom.
Yeah.
Back pains because of that.